Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. Depending on when you're listening to this, you may have just recently celebrated the Super Bowl yesterday, or if you're listening to it on a Monday, maybe you overate this weekend, maybe you had a binge, a few slip-ups, you ate past the point of fullness, and now you're sitting with guilt, shame, and regret. I need you to listen to this episode, and if you need to replay it every time you have a binge or a slip up, please do so. It's so important. So first thing I need to share with you is that you didn't screw up. You had a slip up, but you didn't screw up. You cannot screw this up. The process of healing your relationship with food and ending the binging and managing and learning how to manage the emotional eating and get in charge of your hunger cues and your food choices is a process. And you're not expected to never binge again or never overeat again. It's okay to overeat sometimes. The issue that I think most people find themselves in is their overeating tends to be very impulsive. And it gets to this place where they're super uncomfortable. And so what I want to help you do is mitigate how often that's happening or how the severity of when that actually happens. And the only way we can do that is from learning from our past experiences and then also putting habits in place that are not feeding into this vicious cycle. So before I teach you about what to do after a binge, I want to first tell you what not to do. Okay? Because what the thing that you might be doing after a binge is the exact thing that's making you binge again. Okay? I understand this isn't easy. I apologize if this is triggering for anybody. So if it is and you need to pause and re-listen when you come back, please do so. I really want you to know that this is coming from a genuine place and I really want to help you so that you can end this obsession over food and finding yourself stuck in this just pool of shame, which is literally not going to help in any way, shape, or form. Okay? All right. So the first thing we need to go over is what not to do after a binge. When you're sitting with that discomfort and you've eaten past fullness or you've eaten foods that you didn't actually want to have and you're not feeling well, the immediate thought is to get it out. And when people think of binging, they think maybe they don't struggle with binging because they don't struggle with purging. And now let me first share that there is many forms of purging. And so although in your mind you might be thinking, oh, you don't have a problem because for you, a purge, what you perceive as a purge is self-induced vomiting. And if you are struggling with that, we do need to address it as well. And that is definitely something that is not going to be helpful in this cycle. So the first thing we want to make sure we don't do after a binge is vomit on purpose, okay? Now, there's other ways to purge. So that's the vision that comes to mind for most. But the other way people purge that's more common than not is taking a laxative. So making them have a bowel movement and getting it all out so they no longer feel full to the brim. Okay, that's a form of purging. Another is doing a cleanse or a detox. So maybe just drinking juices or just drinking water, not eating any food. And part of that could also be like restricting your calories. So then you skip breakfast the next day and you skip lunch the next day and you really try to quote unquote balance it out by not eating the following day after you had a binge. Or maybe you're like, you know what? I'm so tired of being here. I need to control myself. So I'm going to go on a 1,200 calorie diet and I'm going to just follow this meal plan rigidly. And that is a form of restriction. And it's also a form of you trying to purge it out. Although it doesn't seem like it's so as obvious as self-induced vomiting or taking a laxative, restricting your calories afterwards is considered a purge. Although you might not get diagnosed with binging and purging by using the DSM, we can still classify that as a purge. And then the other thing that a lot of people do, because maybe for them, they don't even realize they're doing it, or maybe they do have this idea that, vomiting and laxatives are bad, so instead I'm just going to exercise, because exercise in society is viewed as a really good thing. Especially if I work out for 2 to 3 hours a day, I'm going to be looked at as like this strong champion and like, oh wow, look at this person who's super committed and super strong, and wow, like they can work out 2 to 3 times a day. Like that's what I'm going to do. And so now you exercise excessively. And listen, there's nothing wrong with exercise. Obviously, it's very good for us. And, if you're an athlete, or if you genuinely enjoy that amount of exercise and you are feeling really super happy about it in your mind, there's really no issue with it. But if it becomes like you feel like you need to make room for calories or expend the extra calories that you consumed, and you're kind of mad at yourself, you're beating yourself up, and you're trying to get rid of the food, that is not healthy. And that is a form of purging that we need to address. Okay, so those are the things not to do after a binge. And listen, I know you're probably super used to doing that, and it's so uncomfortable to just sit with that food. And I will say those who struggle with binging sometimes do not purge, but they still sit with that guilt and shame, and we need to really reverse that cycle. So just a quick reminder, what not to do after a binge: exercise excessively, vomit or take laxatives, a cleanse or a detox, restrict your meals, restrict your calories, so meal skipping or doing a low-calorie diet. And the reason being is because those are the exact reasons that you're making more room for food. So you're going to be physically hungry, which is normal, by the way, and you're also just making it a lot harder for you to be in charge of your choices, because now we have excessive hunger that after long periods of time with not eating and restriction, our minds and our bodies are like, can you please feed me? Like, I need energy, I need focus, I need fuel, and I need nutrition. And our bodies are going to fight us for it. And if you restrict it for too long and too much, it's just going to fight you right back. Okay? So we really, really need to stop doing those things that are only contributing to the cycle and making it harder for yourself. All right? Now, here's what you can do after a binge. All right? I'm going to give you 5 different things that you can do after a binge that is really going to help you kind of sit with your feelings a little bit, understand what's happening, and come up with a strategy or a plan so that you can kind of forgive yourself and move on. And hopefully that will decrease the frequency of the binges, okay? So the first thing you need to do is acknowledge yourself for being human. Let go of any guilt or shame and recognize that healing your relationship with food takes time. So once again, you didn't screw up, okay? This is part of the process, okay? Now, the second part, this is really, really important because like I said, there's many ways to measure progress with binging if you listen to previous episodes, and it's not just, oh, I binged, so I screwed up, right? There's many ways. So now this is the second part. So identify the area in which this binge may have showed your progress. So for example, if it was your first binge in 3 weeks and you used to binge 3 days per week, that is really, really, really great. If you were able to maybe stop yourself when normally the binge lasts for hours and it only lasted for 30 minutes, right? Or maybe you even notice that you knew certain foods would have triggered you to keep going, so you intentionally chose foods that normally get you to kind of slow down a bit. Either way, those are many areas in which we can measure your progress, and it's not just like, oh, I binged, so I screwed up, right? So it's identifying ways that you are improving, because remember, number 1, healing your relationship with food takes time, so we need to identify the ways that we can measure this progress, okay? Number 3, take some deep breaths, okay? And now, this is where you don't need to exercise excessively, but you probably would benefit from just engaging in some gentle movement. Okay, when our bodies move, we tend to feel better. So it could be as simple as just taking some deep breaths and stretching your arms up, breathing in through your nose, filling up your belly, out through your mouth. Do that 3 times, okay? And maybe just stretch your arms all the way up and around and down and move, stand up, move, or maybe if you can go for maybe a light walk, that is going to be helpful too, Okay, so it's gentle movement. Number 4, replace self-criticism with self-care and compassion. I cannot repeat this enough, okay? Replace self-criticism with self-care and compassion. What would you say to a friend who told you that they just had a binge? Would you tell them, oh, wow, you suck. Like, you're such a failure. Why? What? Why? How did you do this again? Like, are you kidding me? Because I know that's what you're saying to yourself in your head, right? You have to stop judging yourself, and you really need to replace it with compassion, self-care. And then this 5th part to this is get exploratory. If we don't identify what triggered this binge, why it happened, then we can't come up with proactive steps to prevent it. So this is really important. So number 4, I'm just going to go back a little bit. So replace self-criticism with self-care and compassion. Stop judging yourself, really forgive yourself. Going back to number 1, like really just kind of reminding yourself that you're human, this happens, and talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend who is coming to you. And then the 5th part is get exploratory. So what triggered the binge? And what are the proactive steps that you could be putting in place to prevent it from happening again? So I'll just quickly just share with you a few things that happened to my clients and me, as well as me personally. I still have urges to binge, and it's not as frequent, but when it happens, I know from like the jump, I'm like, okay, what am I stressing about? It has nothing to do with the food. For me, a trigger is anxiety. For others, some people will get anxious and they don't eat, but then it could lead to binges later. So for me, I know my trigger is anxiety. My other trigger is, it doesn't happen anymore, but in the past it has been an extreme calorie deficit, which is very common for most people. Other triggers might just be extreme fatigue. So I also shared in the past that I used to binge on Fridays. Fridays were my day that I would really I learned at a certain point in my life that I had to make plans on purpose, because if I just stayed home when I was single, I was, super busy. I was working 3 jobs. And so my Friday nights were like my only moment of solitude. And that was like when I would just binge and binge and binge and binge, and I couldn't stop. And now I know it was because I was overbooking my schedule. I was overworked. I wasn't allowing time for rest and recovery. I had too much on my plate, and I just wasn't allowing enough time to kind of rest and center myself. Okay. So I think that it's important. So you need to know what your triggers are. Is it a person? Is it a place? Is it a thing? Is it a location? One thing that I teach people is to go through who, what, when, where, why. So who is bothering you? It could be your own internal stuff. It could be a spouse. It could be a friend. It could be a boss, a job, whatever it is. What is bothering you? So it could be more specifically like my husband didn't do the dishes like he said he was going to do, and then I had to do them, and now I'm frustrated, and I was supposed to go to sleep, and instead I'm up and I'm tired and blah, blah, blah. It could be so many things. When is this happening? So identify, okay, I'm starting to notice that every Friday night this happens to me. So why is that, right? And then, where are you? I tend to binge when I'm sitting on the couch, but if I go upstairs and I just go to my bedroom, I don't binge there, okay? And then the why. The why could be a number of things. It's probably the hardest thing. And here's the thing I will teach you, and this is what I learned in therapy, going to my own personal therapist. She said, you can explore the why, but there doesn't always have to be a reason. Like sometimes it could just be, it just happened. Okay. It happened. You don't need, if you can't figure out a reason why in like 10 seconds, there might not be a reason, and that's okay. All right. So you don't have to kind of figure it out every single time. All right. So I'm just going to quickly go over what not to do and then what to do. Okay. So after a binge, do not exercise excessively, vomit or take laxatives, do a cleanse or a detox, restrict meal skipping, or follow a low calorie diet. What to do after a binge: acknowledge yourself for being human, let go of guilt or shame, and recognize that healing your relationship with food takes time. Number 2, identify the areas in which this binge may have showed your progress. Number 3, take some deep breaths and engage in gentle movement. Number 4, replace self-criticism with self-care and compassion. Number 5, get exploratory. What triggered the binge? I hope this helped you. If it did, please let me know. Take a screenshot of this, share it on your story, tag me at tips_with_Tony with an I, or the Tips with Tony podcast on Instagram. You can always email me, tipswithtony@gmail.com. And if you're tired of being stuck in this binge purge cycle, whether it's through self-induced vomiting or exercise or just extreme calorie restriction, and you really are ready to break the cycle and you want a strategy, a plan, other than just what we went over today, but something more sustainable, more specific to your lifestyle, then go to my website, www.tipswithtony.com/coaching to apply to work with me today. All right, guys, that is it for me today. As always, I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.